finish out chapter 28. And then next Wednesday to start in the book of Acts. So that is the plan. As long as nothing crazy happens, that's the plan. So let's go ahead. I know we read the first section of Matthew 28 last week, but I want to go back and look at that again because I want to look at some of the responses and kind of focus on some of the responses that we find here as well. So in Matthew 28, verse 1, now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." So in this brief account, the ladies are actually told twice, "Do not be afraid." But I'll tell you, the situation with the angel there does seem a little bit terrifying, right? That seems a bit frightening, where it talks about how there was a great earthquake. There's a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came down and rolled back the stone and sat on it, and his appearance was like lightning. His clothes were as white as snow. I mean, it seems like it could be kind of a frightening experience. And this is interesting because it says, for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. So these typically brave, strong soldiers are totally out of it at the moment. Kind of, I don't know, catatonic, I guess, for fear of him. But the angel tells the women, "Do not be afraid." And he gives them the good news. "Hey, I know why you're here. I've rolled back the stone so that you can see he's not here. He has risen." And he tells them to go and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And then on their way, they see Jesus. Now, they've already been told about the resurrection. They've seen the empty tomb. And now they actually see Jesus. And they fall at his feet and worship him. And now Jesus tells them, "Do not be afraid." And if I put myself in the shoes of these sisters, I'll say, okay, I saw Jesus executed. I saw him crucified. I saw the nails. I saw him die. I saw the spear shoved into his side. I've seen all of that. And now I'm seeing him alive. So, there's a part of me that says, okay, well, seeing a loved one raised from the dead could be comforting. But there's another part of me that says, I think that if I saw someone who I knew was dead and I had seen them dead and then I saw them alive, I think that would be pretty frightening, right? That could be a pretty terrifying situation. So even though they're grasping at his feet and they're worshiping him, there's still some fear there. So Jesus says, "Do not be afraid." And I think we kind of get a little bit of insight here. I'm not sure that fear would necessarily be their reaction if they were expecting this outcome. If I was expecting Jesus to be resurrected from the dead, I'm not sure that fear would be the big response at that point. I feel like it might be a little more joy and a little more relief if you believe that this is what was going to happen, and then you see it. You're like, oh, great, it happened. And here's why I bring this up. Some critics and skeptics today look back at the disciples and these women who came to the tomb as if they were just ready and willing to just accept anything. He said he was going to be resurrected, and so, well, I just accept that any of the slimmest or tiniest evidences that you can have, I'm just going to accept whatever. But what the record actually shows is that they weren't expecting it. They weren't expecting this. Here it talks about their fear when they see it. Other places it's going to talk about the doubt that the disciples have before they see it, and even when they see it. Now, after seeing the evidence, though, they do come around. They're going to see it, and they are going to come around. But these weren't people who were saying, just anything is going to make me believe this. I mean, they weren't expecting it. They didn't know that this was going to happen. And while it's not specifically stated why these women were going to the tomb that morning in Matthew's gospel, when you take a look at the other gospels and you put them all together, you find that they actually wanted to do more for the burial preparation. So they wanted to make sure that everything was done and everything was done appropriately, because things were happening pretty quick on that Friday night, trying to get everything done to beat the sunset. And so that's why they were there on Sunday morning. Not because they were expecting a resurrection. As we talked about last week, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus actually prepared the body for burial. And now these women are coming to check, I guess, and make sure everything was done right. Sounds about right? The women are going to come and make sure the guys did it right, I guess. So they're coming in to do more of this burial stuff and to make sure everything is okay. But they want to honor him. They're not expecting to find him alive at all. So when they see him alive, they're afraid. And when they tell the disciples don't believe it. The disciples doubt. And I know that we often pin that on Doubting Thomas, right? He's usually the one that gets saddled with the whole doubting thing. But the reality is, none of them believed until they saw. None of them believed it until they saw it. We don't have a bunch of people here who are just taking anybody's word for it. These are folks who want to see the evidence. And so I just think it's important for us to go back and grasp that when they have this told to them twice, don't be afraid, because this is not what they were expecting. They're being told, don't be afraid, because they weren't expecting this. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, would Jesus' appearance been the same as before he was crucified?
I don't know. There's one that talks about how
they didn't recognize him.
Yeah, there's one that talks about how they didn't recognize him. But I would think so, because they did see him and recognize him. And so it might have been depending on who he was talking to, and I guess he had that ability to make it to where, he could make it to where you could recognize him or not.
As you get into it, when you get into Acts, the very first chapter, Dr. Luke makes this very, very plain, because the whole thing, the foundation of the church, is built on this. And he says, by many infallible proofs, in other words, things you can't get around. Like these girls here touched him, they heard him, they could see him, things you can't get around. Because the fact that Jesus rose was a big, big thing, especially with the Jews, that some still don't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
So you're right, this is something that you really got to understand, that the people were confused, but many people touched him, seen him, heard him, unget-aroundable facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they weren't, even though he told them again and again and again, this is going to happen, this is not what they were expecting to happen. And so yeah, they're told, don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. So, they're given this wonderful message, and they get to be the first proclaimers of the resurrection. But of course, when you piece it all together with the other gospels, we talked about how the apostles don't believe them. They don't believe it. In fact, Jesus actually has to appear to them in order to get them to go to Galilee. And yeah.
Like also on the road to Emmaus, there was 2 disciples that didn't recognize him.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, I didn't recognize who he was.
Right.
So yeah, that's right. So yeah, and so you have all this going on. That he had to go to appear to him to get him to believe. You find during all this stuff, when you kind of put the gospels together, you find doubting Thomas here. Even though, like I said, they were all kind of doubting. You see John and Peter, who had to run to the tomb to see for themselves, and I mean, they're all very skeptical of this news of the resurrection. They weren't just excited and happy to hear about this. They didn't just believe it. They doubted it. And they were afraid, and they had to be convinced, just like you would have to be convinced, just like I would have to be convinced. They had to be convinced. They're no different than us on that. And so I just think it's important to kind of think about where they were. And there's one other thing that I noticed. The women were told twice, do not be afraid. And a few minutes ago, we were talking about the soldiers and the effect that this had on the soldiers because of their fear, right? But did you notice that the angel didn't tell them, do not be afraid, right? He didn't tell them not to be afraid. And I think there's something important for us to recognize here with that. The women don't have to be afraid because Jesus is their Lord. Jesus is their King. But the soldiers are on the other side. The soldiers are the enemy. They actually do need to be afraid. They need to be very afraid. And they were. And so, the glory of the Lord cuts 2 ways. It holds up and sustains people, his people, but, it also brings judgment, and it's terrifying for those who are his enemies.
I find it interesting about the angel here. It says his countenance was like lightning. How are we to do that? I wonder.
Mine says his appearance was like lightning, so I always just kind of picture his, I don't know. I mean, when I try to picture, I just imagine bright. I just picture bright, light, blinding. That's how I kind of.
Wearing white.
And wearing white. So, yeah.
This was very out of the ordinary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely out of the ordinary. But yeah, that's kind of what I imagine and what I picture when I think of seeing the angel there. And that would be a pretty frightening thing, Travis.
In 2 Kings, one angel killed 185,000 Assyrians. Just one angel. So
there's the reason to be afraid, right?
There's a reason to be afraid.
There might be a reason to be afraid, but that's the way it is. A lot of times when you watch these movies or these shows or whatever, you see the angel sweet and all that kind of stuff. But when you're reading about angels in the scriptures, these people were falling on their face and scared to death and trembling, couldn't even stand. I mean, they were. This isn't, I think, what we typically see in the movies here. I think this was. I think they can be like us because it talks about how you entertain angels without realizing it. So they can be like us. You think about Sodom and Gomorrah and all that. So, but I think that they can also be very scary. They can also be very frightening. And part of what goes along with that is the power and stuff that goes along with that.
And don't you think that we will go through the same thing, even though we know that he really did rise? But when we get to heaven and see this beautiful man in smashing white and a light around him, we're gonna be just as surprised as they are,
I think we'd probably be in awe of it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So, did anybody else have anything you want to add? So, you know, these, I think these two statements to the women, I think the do not be afraid statements to the women, I think those are statements for us as well. You know, I understand the very specific point in the historical context that in this moment, ladies, you don't have to be afraid. Here's what's going on. And I also think that there's a comfort that's there for them forever from now on. I think there's that comfort that's there for them. You don't need to be afraid right now, and you don't need to be afraid ever again. Your king has risen, and all the enemies have been conquered. You know, you're going to be with him throughout eternity, no matter what happens between now and then. As scary as it may seem at times, you really don't have to be afraid, because you have a Savior, you have a Lord, you have your King, and you're going to be with him in eternity. And I think that's a message for us as well. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. He has risen. He is King, and there's no need for us to be afraid, no matter what's happening in the world around us. And you know, I don't know where our culture is going. I don't know if there's going to be persecution that comes up against Christians here in America ever. I don't know if that's going to happen. I know that happens around the world. It could happen here. I don't know if it will, but it could. I don't know who the next president's going to be. You know, there's a lot of things that can frighten us. But what Jesus said and what the angel said still applies. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Now, if Jesus was still in the tomb, we would have a lot of reasons to be afraid, right? We would need to be scared, but he's not. He's not in the tomb. He's risen. He's risen just as he said. So, do not be afraid. It's kind of one of the messages I wanted to make sure that we talked about tonight. Because there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of times we get caught up in this world, and we forget where we're really going, right? What we're actually citizens of, and we get all afraid and worried. But Jesus is with us. Jesus is on the throne. No matter what seems scary around here to us now, don't be afraid. So does anybody have anything they want to add before we move on to the next section here?
I'm just wondering how you can say that after watching TV last night.
I did watch it. Oh, yeah, we got to calm our fears, right? All right, well, let's move into verse 11. It says, while they were going, that's the women there. It's talking about while they were going. Some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, tell people his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. And this is still one of the most popular theories even today. I mean, this is what you hear. This is a very popular idea. But you know, it's really the question. That's really the question, isn't it? Is how do you explain the empty tomb? Everybody has to explain the empty tomb, because as we pointed out, this empty tomb, this resurrection, as Gary was saying a little while ago, this is the fundamental bedrock truth in which all Christianity hangs. This is it. And if you're going to be a skeptic, an opponent of this, then you've got to deal with the resurrection. You know, you've got to have a story for the resurrection. And, you know, the heart of Christianity, the foundation of Christianity is not a feeling. It's not an attitude. It's not even a set of teachings. Now, all that stuff is involved in Christianity and following Jesus. But the foundation is this historical event. Did the resurrection occur? Or did it not? That's the question. Did it occur or did it not? If the resurrection did not occur, then Christianity is invalid. There is no aspect of Christianity that is valid. There's no need to pick or choose the bits that we like or the bits that we don't like. We could just toss it all out and go do something else. But if it did happen, then Jesus is Lord and we must follow him. And being Lord separates him from other great teachers and philosophers. You know, we spent some time talking about the value of Christian ethic. Wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't the world really look better if we lived according to the Word and treated others the way that we wanted to be treated and so forth and so on? But Jesus himself is more than just a philosopher. This is more than just ethics. He's the Lord. He is Lord. And you know, that one ethic that I just mentioned about, you know, treating people the way that you want to be treated. While I believe that Jesus took it further than anyone else had taken it, there were others who had said similar things. What you don't want done to you, don't do to others. That was a concept even before Jesus came on the scene from different philosophers and theologians. But my point is, even that, though it describes how we act as Christians, isn't the foundation of Christianity. The foundation of Christianity is Jesus was resurrected from the dead. And so again, that either happened or it didn't. It either happened or it didn't. This is one of those places where we really only have two choices. You know, oftentimes when somebody only gives us two choices, it's kind of a false dilemma. But not here. It either happened or it didn't.
And I think that shows the wisdom of our God too, in the fact that he gave us those infallible proofs. He didn't tell us you just believe this. He had his son come back here where he was seen, touched, and talked to by many people. Mm-hmm. Solid proof. To me, that shows me that our God wanted us to see that. Mm-hmm. He wanted us to know that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But yet, well, Jesus was seen by many after the resurrection. He was not seen by all.
That's right.
And there wasn't, you know, if God leaves it so that if man wants to mislead himself or fall into a deluding spirit, he can do that. Yep. And so here's the perfect case. There's a story made up about how the body was stolen away by his disciples, even though, you know, we know that, you know, through the inspired word, that's not the way it happened, but it's a storyline, and now man can believe that if he wants. And God lets him have it. Very much like Pharaoh falling back into his own personality and his own way and saying, no, you can't leave. So he truly gives us a choice.
You do. You have a choice. You definitely have a choice. That's a good point. So, you know, yeah.
I'm a little confused by the difference between Matthew and Luke and talking about the resurrection.
Which part are you referring to?
Well, when Marian went to the tomb, it sounds like it was already open. Or there was an earthquake in Matthew. And when you read it in Luke, it doesn't sound like
Let's see. Let me find. What verse is it in Luke? It's Luke,
24 verse 1 just says how they go. Sending one
He
to
said the
the
stone was
tomb.
rolled away.
First day of the week, early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus, and while they were perplexed, let's see, 2 men stood by in dazzling apparel. So that's where they saw that, and they were frightened, bowed their faces to the ground.
And then verse 10 is when Mary and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, went to the apostles.
And let's see here. Now it was, Mary Magdalene. Joanna, I don't think was mentioned in the other one. I think the other Mary was, and went to tell went to tell these things to the apostles. And then you go back to Matthew. Let me go back here. Sabbath or dawn, first of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Behold, there's a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. So this says, it's always fun when you try to go here and you try to mesh them all together. So this looks like went to see the tomb, and behold, it said behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone. Now, it's possible, if you put these two things together, that part happened while they were on their way. So it didn't talk about the earthquake in Luke. It does talk about the stone being rolled away. It does say that they were. It says they went to see the tomb. So it could be that the whole, either Luke just didn't mention it, or the earthquake happened, the angel came, took away the stone, scared the guards half to death, and then they came up on it after the fact and came up on the angels and the tomb that was already opened, and the soldiers kind of laying there looking like they were looking and all that. I mean,
I guess I have a hard time figuring out too, why they came with their spices to anoint the body of Christ if this big rock was there that they couldn't, I mean, how would these women get that rock moved?
that's a good point. Maybe they were going to try to have somebody to help them, or hoping somebody was there. I don't know. I don't know if there would have been somebody there that could have tried to help them, or.
But if they
Or
could
what?
do it, if somebody else could do it, then
Now the guards were there. Maybe they were thinking maybe the guards would help them. I don't know. Although I'm not sure the guards were into helping anything.
I think this really illustrates though, because we know Scripture's inspired, and yet each one of the gospel writers are unique personalities and individuals. Okay, so that they can't write in error because the Spirit is guiding them. But I think what's interesting about this is what looks like controversy, or it is really not. What it is it's more information in another gospel that we don't have in one. And if we put them all together, we get a more clear picture. But just like the women coming, I mean, the stone